All right, we're close enough for me. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for attending tonight's meeting, a neighborhood meeting about the Witherspoon Street Improvement Project. First, we'll jump in. We have Councilwoman Perrone-Lambros with us. Michelle, if you'd like to say a few words, and then we can do some introductions.
Hi, everyone. I just appreciate that, and I appreciate everyone taking the time this evening to come out. Deanna Stockton, our municipal engineer, and her team have done an incredible job of designing the first part of Witherspoon Street. Now we're looking to continue on. So I'm anxious to see it and appreciate all your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. So we have our design team, which it consists of our planning department, engineering department, historic preservation officer, and T&M associates. So here tonight, as well as, our municipal arborist as well. So here tonight we have Ian Baker, construction engineer, Justin Lesko, senior planning staff, I guess, senior planner, Tejal Patel with T&M Associates, Taylor Saputer, our municipal arborist, Tiffany Smith, an engineering inspector, Elizabeth Kim, historic preservation officer, Michael Laplace, planning director, and we also have Claudia Ceballos on the line. Claudia is available if we need translations, and if we have any attendees at the meeting that would like to correspond in the chat or questions in Spanish, Claudia can help assist with that.
Muy buenas noches, señores. Acá necesitan un traductor en español. Para eso estoy disponible. Para sus preguntas las pueden mandar en español. Esto es acerca de su vecindad, cerca de la calle de Witherspoon. Si tiene alguna pregunta, por favor, escríbanos y se la contestaremos en español. Cualquier pregunta, por favor, mándeme un mensaje. Gracias.
Thank you, Claudia. Okay, so just going to jump into our presentation. And like I mentioned, we do have, we have about 20 slides, and you can ask questions through the chat function. I think that is active now. And let me just pull up the slideshow just a minute here. All right. Okay. Please just confirm that you can see the slides moving. Okay, great. So here are the names associated with our project team here tonight. Moving on, if you guys all recall, we started this process actually back in February of 2020 before COVID hit. And since then, we have continued a dialogue about the redesign of Witherspoon Street, mainly focusing on the section from Nassau Street to Paul Robeson. But our first project limits range from Nassau to Green Street. So we have a little bit of an overlap into the Witherspoon-Jackson Historic District. And at this point, we need more feedback and understanding of the needs of that portion of the corridor in order to complete our work on the first phase, which is the Nassau to Green Street phase. So coming into today's meeting, these are the guiding design principles that we've been working with. So you'll see that some of them are more focused, maybe more in the CBD rather than in the downtown area of Witherspoon-Jackson. But we're looking at preserving what's the best of Princeton today and finding new ways and appropriate, desirable, and sustainable development and growth. Obviously, we're looking to enhance the economic vitality in our business districts, have a flexible design because we don't know the future and we don't know what's happening with the automotive industry and single occupancy vehicles. We're looking for stormwater management improvements, complete streets, and safety. So then, just to remind you of the feedback that we got from the first meeting, these are slides actually taken from a September 2020 presentation that we gave as part of the second public meeting. And so based on different topics, we consolidated the feedback that we received at the in-person charrette from February and consolidated it down to this list of items. So it focuses on bike and pedestrian improvements, slowing traffic, widening sidewalks, improving bike parking and facilities, improving drainage, looking at tree wells, rain gardens, improving areas where we know we have existing ponding problems. Heinz Plaza is not really part of the discussion today, but I just left this in because it was part of the original slide. Moving on to landscaping, trees, public art. Again, looking for shady trees, native plants, flowering trees, some public art, and then looking at landscape features between the sidewalk and road. Other comments included streetlights and more focus up on the uptown piece of Witherspoon Street. And then moving down into these topics of parking and loading, safety, transit, and wayfinding. Looking, some of this on parking and loading focuses on resident parking, reducing on-street parking for visitors, safety, again, back to the street lights and improving crosswalks, looking at bike improvements and looking for transit, adding bus shelters, additional bus stop signs, other signage and wayfinding as well. So leading up to today's meeting, we also started having preliminary meetings with some stakeholders in the community. And some of the comments that we received in that meeting were to look at a comprehensive landscape plan for the corridor, that we can't keep the Nassau to Green Street section and improvements separate from what we're looking at for the entire corridor. And the same thing goes with a lighting plan to make sure that it's consistent through the whole corridor of Witherspoon Street. Some mention was made that in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, there's a promenade feeling with the way it's currently developed and landscaped. Also, right now the development is very much a residential feel with some businesses, and I think that's also consistent with the zoning that we have in the area. Every corner is historic in the Witherspoon-Jackson, so we are working to understand what that means and to see how we can use that in our design. And then also to consider building access relative to the road and the sidewalk grade. So this is so far some of the feedback that we've brought into this meeting, and tonight's meeting is now to move ahead and gather more feedback from all of the interested parties. This is the first of hopefully many meetings to discuss what this corridor will look like. We're hoping that the next meeting will be in person. We're working with the Human Services Department to plan for some in-person meetings on Witherspoon Street, possibly at lunchtime, and so that we are making sure that we are capturing everybody that lives and works and moves through that corridor. And just so you're aware, for tonight's meeting, we have posted the notice on the website. We mailed copies of the meeting notice to all property owners from Nassau Street to Valley Road. We also hand delivered the notices to all of those properties, and we went back 200 feet beyond Witherspoon Street, so that we could say that we canvassed all possible parties in the corridor to get feedback. All of the information too for the project is posted on our website, and we will continue to update that as we go through this process. So just a review for those of you who may not have seen this map, this overview of the zoning. Most of the zoning is like a residential business zone. There is a business zone, but that also allows for residential. So it's very, you know, you can see it is different from the central business district, which is shown here on the left. It clearly is more of a focus on a residential with a business component from Paul Robeson to Valley Road at the north. We have historic districts. We have our central historic district in the CBD, and then we also have the Jackson Witherspoon Historic District. And if I'm incorrect on that, let me know, but that's what I found on the website. So bike master plan shows that Witherspoon Street would be improved by having an enhanced Sharrows marking. And I know this has been a subject of much conversation, but right now I'm just setting the stage for the existing documentation that is what we reference as we move into a design project. We have an existing transit service that runs through the area with New Jersey Transit. The freebie, when it is active and running, also runs through. We have multiple bus stop locations. Some of them have bus shelters. Down in the bottom right corner is an image from our concept plan for the Nassau to Green Street portion of the project. We are looking to incorporate a bus shelter at the bus stop in front of the cemetery at Green Street. And the shelter would be similar to that shown in the photo on the left, which is a photo simulation of what's in place now at Palmer Square. So that's the type of shelter we're looking at. That is, like I said, being proposed to be added in as part of the Nassau to Green Street project. And you know, seeking feedback if we would like to see that type of shelter added into these other bus stop locations in the corridor if we have the space for it. And then just moving through, again, we want to focus our time in hearing from the community, but just to remind everybody of the corridor moving north or downtown, looking at cross sections of the road. So from Green to Quarry, you've got the cemetery on one side with parking on the west side, 30 feet of pavement. Sidewalks are about 4 feet. Moving from Quarry to Mclean, again, parking on the west side, sidewalks range, but 4 to 8 feet. This area is further complicated with the grade differences between the sidewalk and the road. And this is an area we'll be focusing on quite a bit to see if we can make changes in the road grade to raise the road. Is there a possibility to drop the sidewalk? Are there opportunities to maybe put the parking on the east side of the road so that if there is the need or for drivers and passengers to get out of parked cars, we have less of a grade difference on that east side. So these are all things that will be looked at, and we appreciate feedback on how to improve the situation here. Moving ahead, we've got Mclean to Lightle. Again, similar situation in the fact that we have the parking on the west side and the sidewalks 4 to 5 feet. and Lightle to Clay again. Franklin to Lee is where we switch the parking. The parking then switches over to the east side of the road, and sidewalks vary 4 to 6 feet. And just getting to the last few slides, Lee to Birch. Again, here is where we start getting a little bit wider pavement, and we still maintain that parking on the east side. Then finally, Birch to Geo. Again, wider pavement, more wide open space, parking on the east side. And then you finally get down to the municipal complex and the terminus of Witherspoon Street at Valley Road with municipal complex and fire department and the old school at Valley Road. So with that, I really want to just open it up. We have been working on the first phase with historic preservation and a subcommittee, and we will continue to have that dialogue and conversation with them for their assistance in selecting appropriate materials for use. Like I said, we're going to be looking at scheduling an in-person design charrette or many as appropriate to get more feedback and to have it be more of an interactive. Zoom has its application, but as the governor is allowing things to resume, we look forward to that opportunity to have more of a one-on-one conversation with the community in person. And then after we get all that feedback, we'll start working on some concept plans that we'll bring back to the community. So that's really it. Here's anything after this meeting that you feel would be helpful to us, please email us. If you send it to engineering@princetonnj.gov, we can distribute it to the design team. And then also the address for the website is listed here. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Ian is hosting for us, and he can bring people in to be able to speak and give us your feedback rather than just using the chat. So please feel free to raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
Great. Yep, and Ian will bring you in.
So Sam Bunting was first. So bring him in. All right, Sam, looks like you're muted right now. There you go.
Thanks, Ian. Can you guys hear me?
You can.
On the camera. You can't see me. Is that a problem?
Nope.
Okay, I'm just going to talk. Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to jump in here because I have to go put my kids to bed. But you know, for this section of Witherspoon Street, I'm very curious about what you're going to do in terms of bicycle improvements. This is a key corridor for accessing the downtown for many people who, like I do, live up on the northern end of town. You've also got Community Park School there, a major generator of bicycle traffic, but the road is really not amenable for safe cycling. There's a lot of traffic. The volume of traffic is pretty high. Some of the speeds are pretty high. Right now you have the sharrows which are painted on the road. It doesn't really work because if you're riding on the sharrows, especially if you're riding uphill towards the town, then all the drivers behind you get really frustrated and start, like, you know, trying to make unsafe passes. So it's really just not a very pleasant place to try to ride a bicycle if you want to get from one place to another. And that's a real shame because it limits the ability of people to get around on bikes, including there's a very large proportion of bike users in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood itself. Some of whom may not always be represented at these kinds of meetings. So I'm very curious to see what you can do. And I understand that it's a very challenging environment to be installing really high quality bike facilities because the street is narrow, because you probably have a need for parking for the churches and so on. But I would probably suggest that at least for the section that runs from Valley Road up to about as far as Avalon Bay, at least, there's probably sufficient street width there that you could fit some kind of bike path or something, which would allow people to, I don't know, maybe cycle on an off-road facility. I mean, it's not ideal.
Sounds like we lost Sam for a second.
I don't know. Somebody changed my status. I don't want to talk for too long, but basically what I'm saying is that for that more northern section of the street, perhaps some kind of side path might be appropriate. As you get closer to the town, I imagine that cyclists are going to have to share the road. And if cyclists are in a situation where they have to share the road on sharrows, you know, that's a scary situation. So we really need something which is going to significantly reduce the speed of motorized vehicles and create some kind of context where drivers are more respectful of people who are trying to ride their bikes in and around that part of the downtown. So I wish you all the best in trying to make that happen. I understand it's a challenging project, so all the best with it. I'm done.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, looks like Bob Hillier, you're next.
I agree with what the bicyclist is saying, is that with the speed on Witherspoon Street, we see cars going by at 40 miles an hour by our office. I can agree with that, the problem with the speed, but one idea that's come up in our planning is to start at Valley Road and come up Henry Avenue all the way to where we're going to have the Franklin Avenue development, and then go through the Franklin Avenue development right into the cemetery and develop a pathway that goes through the cemetery and comes out at Tulane Street and goes from Tulane all the way up to Nassau. And that way it's almost an exclusive line for most of the way. There's not much traffic on Henry Avenue because it dead ends at each end. And once you can get across the Franklin Avenue site and into the cemetery, and if the cemetery is worried about it, you can have security cameras that are tiny and invisible today to monitor it and to make sure there's no, troublemakers. I think it would be a much safer and frankly a prettier drive on a bike.
Yes, that's definitely been something that has been looked at or considered. I know the former mayor, Liz Lempert, also was interested in a path that went through the cemetery. So we'll be following up with the church on that.
There is an interesting aspect to the cemetery. I had a couple of employees come back after a lunch hour and they'd walk through the cemetery and they were absolutely ecstatic with what they found in that cemetery. And I think it's really Princeton's Central Park. It should be. I'm done.
The town doesn't own the cemetery, just to chime in. But it's a great idea. We have explored that and we can follow up on that. Thank you.
Okay. See, Ian, it looks like you've brought in a few people. Do you want to be the appointee of who goes next?
Yeah, it looks like maybe Claudia is bringing him in. She's a little faster than me, but looks like Joshua Zinder has his hand raised.
Yeah. I guess my question is, some of the things that were done in the Nassau Street to Paul Robeson section of the planning, the additional grassy areas, some additional bike parking, maybe some breakout areas with some benches, in those, the what they call the furniture zone in the NASA report. If those things are going to be integrated, because I think there's lots of opportunities, like along the cemetery before you get to the other residential business zones, for there to be little breakout spaces, sort of, a pair of benches that you could just, it's not really that far, but you could take a break from the walk, and I think that, I know Bob has talked about this in the past, but the sort of the continuity of, pedestrian walking area from Nassau Street all the way to Town Hall, I think that, that should be something that's, enhanced as far as a pathway. And I know that one of the buildings that I own on Witherspoon Street, our tenants are asking for, if they saw the other write-up, if any additional bike racks are going to be added sort of on the Witherspoon Jackson side of Witherspoon Street, or if all the bike racks are just going to be downtown. And so I told them I would ask during this call.
We're definitely looking at all of that. Like we'd mentioned, we're looking at kind of a continuity of the design so that it travels fairly seamlessly, or at least complementary, from that first phase of the Nassau to Paul Robeson into this section. Looking at similar tree types to be continued throughout the corridor. If possible, we would love to continue the green planted spaces that are proposed in that first section into this section. It's a matter of prioritizing space for all of the users. So we'll be looking at closely at where our right-of-way line is to see how much space is available. And then we are using bump outs in the uptown section, the Nassau to Paul Robeson, and I think that may also be a good design feature to bring in to this section of the corridor, and that gives us a little bit more space for a lot of these other uses, and hopefully too it will give us an opportunity to work with the Witherspoon Jackson cultural and historic group to maybe look at some interpretive signage or something that talks about the history of the different corners along the corridor, and it gives people a little bit of a place to stop and gather. And so that's what we'll be looking at, definitely. And bike parking obviously is part of that as well.
I think those bump outs are really important, especially at an area like Witherspoon and Franklin Street intersection, because those bump outs make the area that somebody's actually in the street shorter. Mm-hmm. And that intersection in particular, you have a number of young people who are crossing over from the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood, walking back towards the middle school or walking back towards the high school. And they're doing that, multiple times during the day, but certainly, school opening and closing. And I don't know if it's just perception, but it feels like there's not often a crossing guard at that intersection. So making that street narrower, that intersection narrower on Witherspoon side would definitely be helpful.
Do you have any feedback, Josh, on parking, about the one side of the road versus the other side of the road? I mean, we do have the advantage in some parts if we were to flip the parking to the east side which is the downhill side. That gives us an opportunity to create some friction and possibly slow traffic down. But it's also on the opposite side of, say, the churches in the corridor. Any thoughts or any sense on that?
I think that alternating the parking, as you go down Witherspoon Street, I think, from one side to the other, I think is a good thing. I think it'll, help promote slower traffic. I don't think you want to have it necessarily on one side, in particular. I know that, 205 Witherspoon, which is on the corner of Witherspoon and Witherspoon Lane. Certainly my tenants would love to have the parking on our side of the street. And I know Bob's tenants would love to have the parking on his side of the street. So, I don't think it really matters. I think that the overall goal is, with alternating parking on either side, it should slow down traffic, because it's not consistently all the way that you won't have a runway, in one direction.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks.
So I think Peter Lindenfield has been in here for a while. You want to unmute yourself, Peter?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is actually my question. And I've written it up in chat, but I'll read it. I'm Mary Klerman.
Yep.
I live on Harris Road, behind the Valley Road School. So since you're approaching Valley Road, at what point will the Geo Walk be affected? This immensely popular and well-used feature is not officially a park, but functions as such. There is no team recreation, as in larger parks, but that is its charm. Quiet, the perfect place to reach schools by bike, stroll with toddlers and babies, and many dog walkers. This should take precedence over any dog park, because it already exists, is established informally. Please do consider designing it designating it as a park, so that it will remain a part of the town. It's the second most popular place in the whole town, according to a Princeton Future survey a couple of years ago. That's all, thanks.
Thank you, Mary.
Good for you, but now you have mute again.
Who else do we have in here? Looks like Shirley Satterfield is in here. Shirley, if you would like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, well, my question is from way back when Robert Hillier was talking about a bicycle trip through the cemetery, and someone mentioned this like a park. It actually is called the Westminster Abbey of the United States because of so many noted people there. But that's one of the suggestions I can take back to the cemetery committee. It's the property of Nassau Presbyterian Church, and I'm on the committee. So when we have another meeting, I'll bring that up. And also the historic, I had mentioned that every corner from Paul Robeson Place all the way down to Valley Road, every corner is historic. And when you get to that part of your project, let me know so that I can give you the history, and so we can have it represented when you come from Green Street down to Birch Avenue.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mrs. Satterfield. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Let's see.
Okay.
We have a couple more hands being raised. Teneke?
I was going to say, you also have Kip that's been sitting here as well.
I'm sorry, Kip. You were the first one to ask a question in the chat. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Sure. I'd like to bring up the issue that David has already raised in the chat, and that is that parking is of foremost importance. And obviously the retailers and the restaurateurs are all very concerned about the parking issue. But I also want to mention the interpretive signage, the historic interpretive signage, which is not just within the historic district. For instance, the African American newspaper during segregation times, The Citizen, was in the area of the Agora restaurant, and that's in the CBD. And I think that's a very important location to honor and to interpret. So it's not just within the historic district. And of course, the American Revolution, Battle of Princeton, at the end of the battle, Washington and his troops moved through Nassau Street and on up to Kingston. And so I would think that some recognition of the American Revolution would be very relevant too, in terms of interpretive signage.
Okay. Thank you, Kip. We'll work with Historic Preservation Commission and the various historic districts on that. Thank you. Okay. Who's next, Ian or Claudia?
Claudia, feel free to step in.
Jana Moore.
Great.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Hmm.
I won't repeat what I said last week. I'll move on to something that has more to do with sort of the pedestrian nature of Witherspoon Street, all of it really. Because I'm not convinced that the south end of Witherspoon and its design, and that it doesn't really have a planted right of way. It has tree beds, cut out in that diagonal walk pattern. So they're sort of rhomboids that are there for planting. I don't know if that is being proposed to continue down, Witherspoon Street to the north end, because the attempts at having a planted, fully planted strip is really hard to maintain for individual property owners in any uniform manner. So if you really are going to do it, it needs to be done in a way that the town is actually maintaining it and managing it. The only real nice strip, obviously, is Rob Hillier's lot where he redesigned the whole section. But we can't, rely on that level of maintenance from the individual landowner's standpoint. So whatever is proposed, and I'm not sure that the current southern end of Nassau, towards Nassau, the southern end of Witherspoon towards Nassau is what we want, but certainly have issues down in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood with regard to the street section. You've said you talked about changing that elevation, which could solve that, but the sidewalks are as narrow and in some places even narrower than the southern end. So the whole pedestrian nature needs to be considered. I don't know how much room you really have for street furniture, but the scale of it is really important. In that certainly there are a lot of the large trees are coming to their end of life. And that if smaller trees that are, basically maintained at a smaller scale and lighting as well, will change the nature of walking down the street. I mean, it's dark when you're using highway lighting on a neighborhood street. The other thing is, with regard to pedestrians, have to feel that they can be seen by cars, which it's hard to do. When you go north of Paul Robeson Place, there aren't the same kinds of signage around walking, the pedestrian sort of right to always have the crosswalk available to the pedestrian. And even at the intersection of Paul Robeson, Wiggins, and Witherspoon, when that was proposed by the borough initially, we had actually asked the town engineer to do a four-way separate signalization for pedestrians, similar to what was, implemented at Washington Road and Nassau Street, to enable, diagonal crossing and to give the street in patterning, sidewalk design materials and all of that, a much more pedestrian friendly, pedestrian prominence and preference. And that didn't happen. Of course, the signalization can change. That can be adapted. We've got the buttons you have to push, but you don't have to push buttons up at Nassau and Washington Road. So, you need to look at that, especially, where you've got that offset situation. You have an offset situation at Clay and Franklin. And earlier Josh talked about, kids coming, walking from school to and from school. There's sort of, you have to make, several maneuvers to get over to Clay Street if all the traffic had, was stopped. It could be a smoother transition for the pedestrian and a safer one just to stop traffic 4 ways. And whether it needs a guard or not would be determined, but it works at other places without a guard. If you have, of course, some level of signalization. The scale of what happens on Witherspoon North, transitions in sort of, 3 sections. It sort of it's ultra urban and moves up at Nassau and moves towards the more suburban setback of properties. So how those areas are treated could certainly be different than, other sections where perhaps the properties come closer to or sit, with 10 feet from the curb. So those are in addition to the points I made last week. So I don't want to have to repeat that. Deanna doesn't want to hear me go on.
No, not at all. It's very, I especially like the Clay and the Franklin discussion. That really triggered some things in my head that we really do need to look at that. You're right. And just to let you know, we are looking at the Paul Robeson Witherspoon signal to put in an exclusive pedestrian phase as part of the first phase of the project to prioritize pedestrians there. And you do have to push the button at Nassau and Washington.
Well, I never do. It just that's good to know. I mean, if I do, you mean it'll happen faster?
Unfortunately not, but you still have to push the button.
Oh, okay. Oh, there's usually such a crowd, you can't even get over there. So
exactly.
I just wait. Okay.
Exactly. Thank you. I appreciate those comments.
Thank you, Deanna.
Okay. Who's next,
I think
Claudia?
that person named Tinica. There you go.
We can't hear you, Tinica, or I can't.
I can't either.
We can see you. And it's not showing that you're
Sorry.
muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
So my name is Tina Castillo. I live on Dempsey Avenue. And for me, Witherspoon Street is my straight shot route to the central business district. I come to the municipal complex to harass the council. My children go to the pediatricians on that road. And it's just a really swift way to get there, despite that it goes up and down. I would like to point out that when you come from 206 and you're just breezing through at high speed, when you come into town, it would be great to have a reminder at the beginning of like, yes, now you are in a town. So it would be great if the street tells people as they come into Witherspoon Street off 206, hey, you really need to slow down now. Because I'm also thinking of the community pool and the community park school, which, by the way, has like more bicycle parking than any other school, and they get used. So we really need to protect our children from those big, heavy cars going fast. Once I'm on my bike, I get really lazy. I just want to get there. And honestly, to route me through the cemetery, I find disrespectful. We don't ask the cars that come into Witherspoon Street to get rerouted over Franklin or over whatever, go over Jefferson and then back to Witherspoon. No, I'm sorry. I need my straight shots. I need to be acknowledged that I am a road user, and you don't need to shunt me through the cemetery because I am not dead yet. However, I would like you to make sure that I will not be dead anytime soon. And this corridor has also been shown to have extremely high crash rates. And I would guess that the crash rates are only not higher because of the presence of our excellent crossing guards who help the children cross. But, like somebody else said, they are not always there all the time. So even though the bicycle mobility plan says that we should have sharrows there, somewhere else it says that, for the long term, we really should consider bike lanes on Witherspoon Street. And I think this is a good time. Where the Vision Zero policy task force is getting in gear, and let's have an eye on that. And of course, there's always the issue of, what do you do with parking? But I totally trust the permit parking task force. They're doing a great job, including on Hamilton and Wiggins, where they have found a really good solution. And I would also like to point out that there is a huge parking garage by the former hospital. And I have to say, whenever I go there, even the lower level is half empty during the day. And certainly, there's like 5 cars on the second level, and there's another level. So I think let us not forget that parking garage exists, because it may be the key to really making this corridor safe, not only for cars, but also for bicycle riders like me, and to pedestrians as well, who need to be able to cross it in a safe way. Thank you.
Thanks, Tinica.
Claudia, do you know who was first? I know Michael Floyd's been in here for a little while. And Michael, are you ready? If you want to.
Actually, it's Berna, B-E-R-N-A.
Okay.
Berna, you can unmute yourself if you're ready.
Oh, that must have been an accident. I didn't have anything to say. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Worries. So next on the list, I think is Michael Floyd. Then
Okay. I have a question.
go for it, Michael.
Okay, let's go underground. I think part of your activities is investigating the sewer and the water system. Any update? How far along are you with the investigation, and what have you found? And ultimately, I'm wondering if it will have any impact regarding laterals and the private homeowners, property owners, but because you're doing the whole Witherspoon Street investigation, right? Okay.
Right. Yep.
Could you speak to that a little bit, please?
We can, definitely. Thank you, Michael. You're teeing it up for us. So as part of our capital projects, we always, we don't look just at what's on the surface, but we also look at our infrastructure under the ground. So that means the sanitary sewer, the laterals that serve your properties, the storm sewer. We work with the water company, New Jersey American, to have them investigate the condition of their water main as well as their service connections, and also with PSE&G gas. So we have been alerted by PSE&G that this a portion of this corridor or a lot of this corridor will require gas main upgrades, and they also will replace services typically at the same time. We have been working with them on the section of Witherspoon from Nassau to Green Street right now, but from all indications, it looked like they needed to extend their improvements at least up to Franklin, if not further north. So that work does get coordinated with us. In terms of the storm sewers and the sanitary sewers, which are under our jurisdiction, the Sewer Operating Committee has a video inspection vehicle in which they can bring it out and they run a camera through those sewer lines. And so we will be working with them to get the video inspection done. I don't know, they've been focusing up further on Mount Lucas for us because that that project is first, but they'll be in this section definitely taking video of the storm sewer and the sanitary sewer to see where we stand in terms of the condition. And if improvements are needed, it will get incorporated into our project. Depending on, I mean, the homes and the properties are fairly close to the right-of-way in this case. So I presume that improvements we make on the sewer laterals would just extend to the right-of-way line and not all the way to the building structure. But we'll have a better sense of it once the sewer group gets in and starts looking at the condition of the main and the connections for the laterals. And we'll be providing property owners more information about that as we get further along in the process.
Okay.
And we will also work with PSE&G and Verizon with the utility poles. Unfortunately, they're aerial utilities and they do not have to take on the cost of putting their utilities underground, but we can work with them to get utility poles replaced and to clean up the lines that are on those utility poles. We've been doing it for a number of years on Bank Street with them, and once Bank Street is finished later this summer, we'll just switch them over to Witherspoon Street and make sure they get that area cleaned up as well.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions, Michael?
No, that was it. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
I think next we have Rosetta Bruce. Rosera?
If she got up from her desk, maybe we can go to somebody else. Oh, no, she's unmuted.
Okay, I need to ask you about, will there be any cost as far as engineering the sewer system in front of, I live at 191 Witherspoon Street. And another thing, I have trouble getting out of my driveway a lot. Is there going to be some type of marking where the cars slow up if they know that you're coming out?
So you're at 191 Witherspoon Street? Is that correct?
Yes.
I heard, yep.
Okay, we will take a look at that and see what we can do to address that issue. Regarding any potential cost on the sanitary sewer. Typically, when we have an improvement project and we replace sewer laterals in the public right-of-way, that means in the area of the road plus all the way to a point behind the sidewalk. We do not assess property owners for that work. At times, we have had a contractor come in and video inspect individual laterals, and that may carry with it a fee of about $250. That may be a cost that is incurred by the property owners, but at this point, we have not made a determination about how we're looking at the laterals and what costs or if work is needed beyond the right-of-way line. So technically you would be, the only cost that could be incurred would be for the actual inspection of the lateral and then any work that might happen beyond the right-of-way, so behind the sidewalk to the building structure. But we have many, many steps that we would go through before we get to that point. So there would be notices about potential video inspection. There would be notices about an assessment process, and that's a public process that would go through council. So I can't say that there wouldn't be a cost at some point, but we're not even at that point to make a determination.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay.
We have our Rosera Bruce.
Yep, she just spoke.
Yep, we just had her. So is it Christine S. next?
Shirley Satterfield. Raise
Okay.
her hand again.
Sure.
My question has already been answered a long time ago, so that's okay.
All right, thank you, Shirley.
Thank you.
Okay, how about Christine S.?
I didn't have any questions. I don't think I raised my hand, but.
Okay, thank you,
Hi,
Christine. Please, from Sustainable Princeton and as a resident of Princeton, please feel free to provide any comments if you think of it after the meeting.
I came late, so was there some designs shared? I couldn't find anything, or is this just talking about?
No designs yet. Right now, we are just gathering feedback from residents, stakeholders, constituents, and then we'll be following up, processing all of the feedback and looking at putting together some concepts that would come at a later meeting. Okay. All right, looks like Lori is next. Ian, you're muted. Oh, nope, Lori is not here. Okay. Ian, do you want to go through the question and answer or chats for us?
Yep. So Lori had a couple of the questions in the Q&A. The first one was, if the road is widened to accommodate parking on the east side, doesn't this limit the area for potential outdoor seating for commercial uses, as north of the cemetery on Witherspoon is becoming a more desirable commercial area? And then to follow up, she said, however, staggering may be a better alternative.
I think I'll go on the record to say we are not widening the road. Whether we narrow it is another question. And that I can't answer right now, but we are definitely looking at, again, all of the users and all of the needs in the corridor and trying to find a best fit solution.
So the next question is from an anonymous attendee. What is the overall timeline for the implementation of the street improvements? Is there funding in place already?
So we have received a DOT municipal aid grant for the project. I think it's roughly, so the project being from Green Street to Franklin, because the Nassau to Green Street project is already in process. We do have a grant for that project, but this next phase that we're focusing on with tonight's meeting, we have, I think it's approximately $900,000 in grant funds from DOT for it. And I think we're looking, Tejal, you may have to help me on this. We have 24 months to go out to construction or to award the construction contract. And I think that puts us into 2023. Can you confirm for me?
I just want to make sure that the grant was for 2020, right? It's good for 2 years. And if the design process takes longer, you get an extension of 6 months.
Okay. So that means 2022 then?
Yes, 2022.
Okay, thank you.
And then the last question from Joshua Zinder was, will you be considering putting electric underground and cleaning it up in the historic streetscape?
Yeah.
Kind of touched on it.
Exactly. Unfortunately, it's not easy and it's very costly, and the utility company does not take on that cost themselves. It would be borne by the adjacent property owners. Okay. Let's see. How about in the chat? Do we have comments in the chat? We also have Yaina up here. Yeah, if you have more comments, Yaina, feel free and we can go back.
Okay, yeah, I had a question, it's a continuation on the utilities. For the stormwater runoff, you're still using a sort of a gravity flow. You're not doing curb drains and things like that, right?
Correct. We're looking at underground piping and yeah.
That's the way it is now. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, if we have opportunities, we try to do some green infrastructure, but we don't know yet if we have those opportunities.
Okay. And is that a sewer main that's going down Witherspoon? Are there any main utilities that are branching off onto the Witherspoon Jackson streets that are perpendicular? I mean, we had a big street improvement. It seems like yesterday because it had been such a long time since it had been done before that, like 50, 60 years. But, within 25, 30 years ago, Witherspoon Street was on that, reconstruction. Mm-hmm. So, so my question is it part of a main delivery of utilities and collection for the stormwater coming from the other streets and going to the other streets.
Yes, there is, yes, the sanitary, I think, and the storm. I mean, there's some limited storm areas in the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood, and I think the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood also tends to flow, like, say, John Street down towards Community Park. So we may not get a lot of inflow from the streets on the west side. But I do know, like, the sanitary, I think there is a sanitary inflow.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
all right, so coming down. And then, okay, you talked about electrical, water lines, potable?
Yep, we'll work with a water company to make sure that they have sufficient water service and that their main is in good shape.
Okay, and that is running down Witherspoon, as far as I
Yes.
understood. Okay, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Kip, you're back on. Do you have questions for us as well?
I just wanted to clarify, I'm a little confused about what is already designed and what isn't, if we're talking about continuity. So have you already chosen the street trees and the sidewalk treatment and some of the light fixtures? Has that already been chosen for the first segment?
So we are still in a concept development phase with the first section. For those of you on the call, we do have a special council meeting on Tuesday night, the 25th. We had gone to a council meeting in the last couple of weeks, and it felt like there were still sufficient questions on the design of the road from Nassau Street to Green Street that we needed to bring it back to council for a special meeting. So it's not set in stone at this point. You know, we have general guiding principles that we're working with, and we're making tweaks. But yes, we have looked at sidewalk materials. We had made a preliminary selection of pavers to be used both in the roadway from Nassau to Spring, but then on the sidewalks all the way throughout from Nassau to Green Street. And the idea, working with the HPC subcommittee, is that we would use the same sidewalk paver material as we move north into the corridor, just in a different size. So in the uptown business district area, we were looking on the sidewalks to have a larger paver, something like a 12 by 24. But as we got into the area north of Paul Robeson, where the character changes, we were looking at something that was more like a brick size, like a 4 by 8 on the sidewalks. So that's where we were trying to use complementary or the same materials, just in a slightly different design into this neighborhood area. We're also looking at taking the street lighting. We haven't completely finalized the selection of street lights, the pedestrian scale street lights throughout the corridor. I think we have a tentative recommendation of the type of light, but it hasn't been blessed by all parties involved yet. So let's see. Yeah, we're still talking materials in terms of trees. We do have a list that we've been working with Taylor, the arborist, on, and I'm sure he's been working with the Shade Tree Committee. So that we have a list of trees that can accommodate all the varying conditions, whether it's wet feet in green infrastructure or, maybe these narrower spaces in the downtown area of the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood. Taylor, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Or yeah, Justin and I, we do have a list that we're going off of. The trees selected are not only not only do well in the urban environment, but also do well in the wet conditions of a rain garden, also the dry conditions of a rain garden. So the trees selected right now are native trees, also native cultivars. There will be a diverse selection. It won't just be one certain tree. And then the goal is to continue that continuity down as we go north. So there is a selection of trees. Once the time is more appropriate, there is a shade tree subcommittee that will, chime in as well. And then in regards to the green infrastructure plant material, we do have a list, same thing, all vegetation that is, that does well in the rain garden setting. So once those pockets of green infrastructure get designed and we know what space we need or how much space we have, that's when we'll finalize the plant material list.
Part of it has already been designed, it sounds like. So it would be good for everybody in the neighborhood to understand what's already coming. If there's going to be continuity, it might be some adjustment to acknowledge the one district and acknowledge the second district, whatever, that needs to be figured out. And also, we've had bad luck with using the same tree, for a street tree. So, what it'd be good to know what thinking has gone into that, whether any kind of alternation or alternate, or one segment might be one tree, another segment might be another. All that is, but we've all had, Princeton's had very bad experience with street trees.
Yep. Yeah, we actually had a meeting today about that, Kip, and Taylor put together recommendations, and we can get that posted to the website so you can see kind of, at least in general, what the guiding principles are. Again, it's subject to the space that's available, and that's somewhat in flux in the, it's basically in flux for the entire corridor. It's still changing in the Nassau to Green Street section, and then obviously we haven't done much design, if any, of this northern section yet.
Okay, Sophie Glovier, she just raised her hand, so she's next.
Hi, Sophie Glovier here on behalf of the Watershed Institute, and I just wanted to say that we appreciate stormwater management being an important component of this project, and also planning to include green infrastructure and street trees, and that will go a long way towards mitigating heat island effect and addressing flooding issues and water quality. So we thank you for that.
Thank you, Sophie. We'll be working with Mike Pizarro and Corey Cressiter as we move ahead in really designing these green infrastructure areas. Okay.
And we have Mr. Peter Lindenfeld. He just raised his hand again. Peter?
Is on my computer. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here, Mary Klerman.
She lives in the same house.
It's his computer, but my voice. So I'm asking about the trees. I'm happy to hear that Taylor's looking at a variety of trees. One of the things that's concerned me for a long time is that along Harrison, by the shopping center, the trees there are spaced so far apart that they don't really create any shade at all. And I'm wondering whether what you're looking at is shade trees or fruit trees, like I guess they're pear or whatever the white blossoming trees are on Witherspoon between Nassau and Hullfish, and what age or what level of maturity of trees are you going to put in? Are you going to put in big trees or the little skinny ones that take a long time to produce shade?
So the typical spec for a street tree planting contract is a 2.5 inch to 3 inch caliper street tree. So it's about this wide in diameter, and then it's going to have a spread on about 12 to 14 feet. The trees that we are talking about, the street trees, will be shade trees, meaning they'll get big over time. The understory, going more in the green infrastructure, they will be smaller ornamentals, smaller trees that aren't going to spread and impede traffic with some understory vegetation to supply some multi-season interest. Josh had a question about the Princeton Elm. Yeah, that's one of the trees on the list. They're resistant to, well, less susceptible to Dutch elm disease. They grow in a vase shape, so they're good for traffic. But that is one of the trees we are considering. Native hackberry, the seedless sweet gum is on there, swamp white oak. So they're all native trees or cultivars of native trees that do well in the urban setting.
I'm sure you're doing a great job with it, Taylor. I'm happy to know that you're on it. One of the things I've wondered, I once took account of all the places in town that I could see that, or at least all the places where I walk, where I could see that a tree had once been and was now gone. And I wonder, are you going to put the trees back in the same kind of spacing, or will they be spaced differently? And or are you able to put them into those curves, those nice curves in the sidewalk, so that they have the character of something that has to be walked around, which is really kind of nice? That's it.
That isn't quite determined yet, but I think we can all agree that if a location makes sense for a tree, we will most certainly try to get a tree in that location.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. And Taylor, Yana also just asked if there would be flowering and then more details on the caliper at mature age. So that might be something to add into the information that we put on the website.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
A couple more questions came into the Q&A. Joshua Zinder has another one. In the 1970s, Princeton replaced a lot of dead elms with male trees, and the pollen count has soared as a result. Are we planting both sexes of trees?
Taylor, you have an answer on that?
No, I'd have to look more into that in regards to the pollen count. I do put Princeton Elms on my street tree contract. In regards to male or female, I'd honestly have to look further into that. Some of the other trees I mentioned, one was the Rotundiloba sweet gum. That one, for instance, it has all the benefits of the sweet gum. It's tolerant of wet conditions, dry conditions, urban environment, but it doesn't get that spike ball fruit. So that's an example of a cultivar. But in regards to the pollen, I'd have to do further research into that. So I'm sorry I can't answer that now.
And we had one more question from an anonymous attendee. The lighting by the cemetery on Witherspoon specifically is underwhelming. During COVID, I walked to my office, from my office to my residence in Princeton after sundown in the dark. Were it not for the full moonlight, it would have been completely dark. I did not feel safe walking in that area specifically because it was not well lit. Please consider something by the cemetery specifically. Thank you for your consideration.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. And as part of the work that TNM is doing, they do have a lighting professional that is looking at how to best provide pedestrian scale lighting, as well as what we need at crosswalks. Okay.
Peter Lindenfeld, he raised his hand again.
Yep.
Not really.
Go ahead, Mary.
Not really. We didn't raise it again. And I'm sorry that happened. I don't know how it happened. Sorry.
No worries. Okay. How about on the chat, Ian?
There are a lot of comments. There's some questions. I think most of the questions have been answered at this point. I could say that everything that goes in the chat will be saved in our document so that, you know, it's just documented and recorded. We can reflect upon it as we push through the design. Yeah, I think we kind of covered everything in the chat, and There's no more hands raised and no more Q&A.
Not anyone, so we're good to go.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm just reading through the chat comments as we're still on here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Again, if you have thoughts after the meeting, please reach out through our website or email us at engineering@princetonnj.gov. We'll post the recording of this meeting as well as all of the slides from the meeting on the website. And if you have any ideas or friends that aren't attending this meeting, please reach out to us. We really want to get good feedback from a cross section of the community to make sure that we have the full representation. So like I said, we will be coming out hopefully into the neighborhood on Witherspoon Street to have an in-person meeting soon. So just keep an eye on our website, and if you can email us, we'll get you on an email list and we'll start growing our communication in that respect as well. But thank you everyone for attending, and we'll be in touch very soon. And join us, like I said, on Tuesday, the 25th at the special council meeting on Witherspoon Street for Nassau to Green Street. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Night. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.